Hello, welcome back to Tutor on a Bike. I've just come back from England, got hunted out. They chased me with shotguns and everything. Today I want to do the third in a series of talking about some of my relatives that were involved in either the First or the Second World War. So, you've heard about my Uncle Bob, you've heard about my Uncle Willie, and now you're going to hear... now you're going to hear about my Uncle Alex. So, Alexander Seaton Lorimer, Flight Sergeant during the Second World War. Now, I really need to start at kind of the beginning to tell you a little bit about this guy. He grew up in a very small farm. There were 4 of them. There was Alec, there was Helen, there was Dorothy, who is my grandmother, and there was John. I can't remember what order they came in. I think John was the oldest, but I'm not sure. Anyway, grew up in a very small farm, and there was four children, and money, as you can imagine, was a bit tight. So in the very late 20s, 1920s that is, Alec decided that he was going to join the Hudson Bay Trading Company. So that's what he did. He went over to Canada, and for the first 2 years lived in a tent in Canada and traded with the Cree Indians for furs mostly, and that's what he did. A horrible way to live, I would have thought. The first year he was just in a tent, and the second year he dug a hole and put the tent over it so that he could actually stand up. And he traded with the Cree Indians. Indians, it's probably not the politically correct term nowadays, but as you'll find out later, I've met some of them and they're perfectly okay with using the terminology. So he stayed there doing that job for around about 10 years in total. He latterly teamed up with a fellow trapper trader, and they lived in a little hut. I'm going to put some photographs up now just to let you see the kind of life that they led. It was a real frontier kind of life. Him and his pal at one stage bought an aeroplane because they thought, well, we can build ourselves an airstrip, and that's going to be a better way to transport the furs down to the market or wherever they had to go, because that was a 1,000-mile trip, and they had to do it by canoe and by walking. So they had bought this aeroplane. It never came to anything because the war broke out, so they never got to that stage. But that was the next phase in their business plan, if you like. It was to have their own plane and fly stuff out, and they had actually bought the plane. So war was declared, and Alec, being passionate about flying, wanted to join the Air Force. So both him and his pal, and I'll put up a little newspaper clipping here, but they travelled by canoe and foot and got some lifts and managed to travel the 1,000 miles to the recruiting office and joined the Royal Canadian Air Force. So although Alec was a pilot in his own right, they didn't need pilots, or he didn't have the necessary qualifications, or whatever reason, I don't know. But he became latterly a tail gunner in a Whitley bomber. And what the Whitley bombers in his squadron did was fly over the Bay of Biscay and hunt for submarines. That's what they did. And he did that for the duration of the rest of his life, actually. He was killed not by being shot down, but his pilot, either by error, by mechanical malfunction, or whatever reason, I don't know, but he flew straight into a cliff. So Alec died. They were quite high up a cliff. It apparently took them about 2 months for the weather to clear so that they could then be recovered. So Alec is buried in the Bilbao cemetery in Spain. I'll put a photograph of his stone up just now. And that was kind of it. That was his story over, or so we thought. Now, the reason I know so much about Alec is because he only had post once a year. He wrote letters, but they only went out when he went down to market. So the letters that he wrote were written over the course of a year, and he did it to pass the time, and he has the most unbelievable letters descriptive of what he's been doing, and it really should be turned into a book. It may be a project for another time, but I mean, when he was leaving to join the Hudson Bay Trading Company, the local paper put a little article out about him and called it, let me just pass him, headed it An Adventurous Disposition. And I thought that would be a terrific name for his book, because adventurous he certainly was. We've got loads and loads of paperwork, loads and loads of letters about Alec's life. And I really wish I'd met him, but he died during the war. But as I said, that's when we thought the story was over. Good little bit of family history in document form, and that was it. What is this fella doing? All right. However, a long, long time later, decades and decades later, I decided to do a little search. I think it was my granny wanted, was it my granny? Yeah, I think it was my granny wanted a photograph of his gravestone. And the War Graves Commission have a project where they go around and photograph all these things, which is marvellous. I think it's done with the aid of volunteers as well. So I went on and managed to find his gravestone photograph, printed it off, and that was fine. But when I was doing the search, I came across a family tree, and it was on the internet, and it was just headed up the family tree, or the history of. We need to go past it. There we are, that's better. Of Alexander Seachin Lorimer, and I thought, well, this can't be a coincidence. So I investigated it a bit further, and there was Alec, and that was where the family tree kind of ended on the internet, but it went all the way back to round about the 1700s of who his ancestors were, etc. And I was a little bit curious, because we're not a massively big family, and it seemed strange that somebody was trying to look up Alec. So I found out who had done the original work and done the family tree for him, and it was somebody in Canada. So got in contact with them, and lo and behold, it turns out that Alex had been, shall we say, a little more than friendly with some of the Cree Indians, and he had a child. As it turned out, he probably had, they reckon, about 6. So a busy boy. But we knew nothing about this, because obviously back in the days when Alex was over there, you wouldn't admit to having children out of wedlock. So anyway, that was massively interesting. And a couple of years later, one of his sons came over with his granddaughter rather. His granddaughter is a policewoman on the, I think, well, they still call it reservations themselves, but she's a Native American police officer looking after the Native Americans, or Indians as they're quite happy to be called. So they came over, they went to Spain, they saw the accident site, well, from a boat anyway, because it was a sheer cliff, and they went to visit his grave, and then came over to Scotland to come and meet up with some of his relatives, us. So this all was, a little bit hearsay until they turned up. Now, one thing that is a trait in my family, so the Lorimers are from on my grandmother's side. My grandmother was a Lorimer. And in our family, I don't know why, normally blue eyes are a recessive genetic trait, but it doesn't seem to be the case for my family, because every single descendant from the Lorimers has blue eyes, myself included, my son, my mother, my granny. And what was most striking when we met his son and his granddaughter is, although they were very obviously Native American in appearance and skin colour and facial features, they both had the most piercing blue eyes. Oh, that was rough. Which was, would kind of put an end to any potential questions about his heritage, and certainly in our eyes. So, fabulous. We're still in touch to this day. We haven't met any of the other potential 5. He was an old man by the time we met him. He's still alive, bless him. We had given him his father, so Alex, when he got killed, we got presented, or my granny got presented anyway, with his observer wings and a little kind of silver commemorative plaque thing that the RAF gave him. So we gave that to his son, because that's only right after all. And he was very pleased to have it. He also got copies of all his letters, all the family photographs that we had of him, and fabulous. So that was Alex. He left a dynasty over in Canada, as it turns out. I'm very sorry I didn't get to meet him. He's one of the people, having led such a life, I would have loved to have met him, but it wasn't to be. I heard plenty of stories about him from my granny, and obviously we have the letters, which are they're just worthy of reading in their own right. Never mind the fact that it's a member of my family. So there we go. So that is the third in my series of 3 stories about war heroes, if you like, in my family, coming up to Remembrance Day. Tomorrow, which will be Remembrance Sunday if I get my timings right, I'm going to play a little song. I'm not going to play a little song, I'm going to have a little song played to you through my video. It's a song called, well, it's got 2 names. It's called, when it was initially written, it was called No Man's Land. And It was then re-recorded by the Furies, the Fury brothers, Eddie and Finbar over in Ireland, and they called it The Green Fields of France. So the song's known by both titles. It was written by a Scotsman called Eric Bogle, who lives in Australia, has lived in Australia most of his adult life, and he wrote it after visiting the fields of Flanders over in Belgium, and it's one of the most powerful anti-war songs certainly I've ever heard. He's a folk musician, and he writes folk music, and folk music has certain benchmarks, if you like, that you've got to meet, which Eric is a master at. So first and foremost, it's got to be easy to play, because there are varying skill levels wanting to play it, and it should tell a story, and in this particular case, a warning to the future. So it's a lovely song. I've done a little montage of photographs to go along with it, and with the video, just to make you a little bit more interested in it. But listen to the words and enjoy it.